What's up, everybody? This is Talkative Carl. Excuse me. Back again for another Iron Man related reviews. I got three set up for today. At least today or this week. However whatever point of view you're uh, viewing it. Uh, First things first, I'm gonna cover another classic Iron Man storyline. Uh, uh, this kind of permeated in my mind. It's like of a lot of Iron Man stories from the old comics. Armor Wars probably stuck out of for me mostly because if you ever watched the '90s TV show, uh, you know that's where I know Iron Man from. That's my first introduction to Iron Man. Even though to some people back then he was like a B-list kind of superhero, I always dug him. There's been times he's been like crossing over between like the '90s Spider-Man TV show, which eventually I want to start doing TV show reviews of that. Uh, and by the way, I got the window crack here, so you might hear some kind of outside noise. That's that because you know I don't want to get stuffy in here. But yeah, and like you talking about, I think it was the most underrated theme song from a TV show because like of course you got the '90s Spider-Man theme song, and of course the Spectacular Spider-Man theme song is pretty hot too. But you know, I think in some cases Iron Man theme song kind of got drowned out by Batman the animated series, Superman the animated series, X-Men animated series, Pokemon, Sailor Moon. So of course it doesn't hit as hard as those, but I put it up there as far as like iconic theme songs because like it just hits home. Like I am Iron Man. It's like you see like the opening and him just in his workshop and just like pounding on like some metal, and you see like a silhouettes of all these suits of armor rise behind them after each pound, and it's like really set the tone that this is like a you know uh like a very unique superhero at that time. At least for me, it's like you know. But like I said, like that was my first introduction to Iron Man. Since then, because I mentioned this a few times. My uncle had like a whole closet full of comic books. Now he's long since sold uh, uh, a large portion of them, but he let me keep like I had like in my closet. I got like a big box of comics that he let me have. So I grabbed what I could, but I remember him distinctly saying like, stick to like those that got like two like two of the same thing, so I can just have one copy. So, but the Pokemon stuff is like Spider Man. If I you know put it out, I kind of this is long before the MCU, so it's like I wish I know I got like at least one or two Captain America stuff. There's a Spider-Man comic book with a Black Panther tie-in. So there's a lot of stuff that I wish hindsight is 2020. I wish that I realized how important they will be in the future, or at least had some appreciation of them, and I'll be more conscientious of grabbing some now while the getting was good, and I could just grab it for free without having to have to buy comic books because nowadays especially expensive with the inflation and everything like that. I'm not saying I can't get any at your any local comic book shop, but you know the way like the prices of comic books and omnibuses are, you really gotta be picky of what you're willing to spend money on. Like you know first thing, like if I want to spend anything first and foremost of a comic book, I want to get, which was my first or second comic book review of of Doctor Strange, Last Days of Magic, Way of the Weird volumes, um, which you can check out up on the channel, youtube.com/talkativecarl. That was one of my first comic book reviews that I did on the channel. I still was like getting used to the idea of being on camera and doing these like summaries of these stories. I think Moon Knight was the other one. A Moon Knight story was another one. Right when the TV show was first announced. So yeah, check that out. I'm going off on a tangent. I'll just start like bring it up. Like I said, I already took care of like Demon in a Bottle review last week, so you can check that out as well. And so yeah, now I'm going to Armor Wars, and I'm it's like 8-issue thing, but there's 4 issues prior to the core one that it's kind of like a prelude. I think like, and then technically I think there's like a, I think it was the 8th or the 9th comic in like the core issues, like an epilogue. I'm blanking on which. I'm pretty sure there's like a 9th one. That's a kind of like an epilogue to the entire Armor Wars story arc. But the prelude basically, you know, well, you get a good gist of Iron Man Rose Gallery through these the prelude and the main story arc. I don't think anybody appreciates uh, as far as like Iron Man's Rose Gallery, because what they usually stick to, the Mandarin, if you know in the MCU, they kind of like botched that a bit, in my opinion. Uh, and maybe Whiplash, but we'll get into that once I do the Iron Man 2 review a little bit later. But, Iron Man has some pretty, cool Rose Galleries. Like in this, the prelude, you got the Ghost, which you saw in Ant-Man and the Wasp. But as I mentioned, one of my Iron Man videos last week, is normally a guy, a snarky kind of character. I brought him up in my Iron Man Armored Adventures Season 1 review last week, that, just like with Taskmaster, who they also, gender bent in the Black Widow movie, they're snarky guys from New York. And, Ghost is pretty much like, like a, like a hitman, but for espionage, corporate raider type of goon. That, if you hire in the Ghost to sabotage a business rival, that's your guy. It's kind of like, Deathstroke before like corporate espionage. And he has a suit that allows him to, like a ghost, be intangible and invisible at will. But the only thing is, he actually has to be physically present to do any kind of damage. But that's probably the only Achilles heel in the suit. I almost forgot. I keep forgetting to have my slides up and running, and I am probably sorry, guys. Oh my god, this does take but a moment. It's only like 8 slides, so unlike when I first started doing these reviews, way back when for comics, I had to really get used to having slides, so I have some kind of picture, visual representation for you guys. A second here. There we go. Hmm. Hotkeys. There you go. So there you go. There's the ghost. And like I said, you get the a lot of people like me is kind of upset because like after the first Iron Man movie in the sequels, they kind of like kind of sort of bossed their villains. I'll mention this in my Iron Man 2 review, but it kind of like merged like Crimson Dynamo with Whiplash. Because it was still in phase one kind of situation. They didn't have all their ducks in a row, and was still getting ready for like the Avengers and see how that would play out. So they wasn't too concerned with like kind of accuracy. And we got like the Mandarin, who's pretty much like Iron Man's Joker. You kind of screw that up, and now it's like you got it all trying to hackney way of reintroducing him in Shang-Chi, and you know, comic book history wise, Mandarin's not the father of Shang-Chi, but you're trying to reinvent Shang-Chi to make him relevant to the MCU and blah blah blah. Haven't read, any Shang-Chi related books. Eventually, I will, but I have a half expectation in the past couple of years, or at least past year since Shang-Chi came out, or at least a few months before the movie came out. I'm pretty sure I have no confirmation on this because I haven't read any new Shang-Chi stuff, but knowing how like the comic book industry, operates from other past, uh, examples, I'm pretty sure they kind of retcon in the comics that he's related to the Mandarin in some way, which has not been the case. Because I read a fair bit of Iron Man stuff, not like heavy, but there's like a few times I read Iron Man comics with the Mandarin in it, and he has never had Shang Chi as a child. You don't want to confuse the readers and blah blah blah. It's MCU, and it's like a whole thing. But you get like somebody like the Blizzard, Whiplash, uh, uh, the Beetle, which technically is more of an Iron Man villain. Uh, Madam Mask, Ironmonger, and of course the Mandarin. So he has a fair amount of rogues gallery if you look hard enough. But like I said, like the ghost in here uh, was hired to sabotage Tony Stark's, Stark Enterprises, because kind of just like in the movies, Stark moved to the West Coast after Stark Industries kind of got bought out. It was a whole thing. He lost a significant amount of money, so he started like kind of sort of from the ground up and reinventing himself to reacquire uh, his funds. Still not making weapons, but still want to like make inventions to help the world, and like I said, start from the ground up. Pretty much starting like a whole new chapter in his life out of New York, in California, and of course you get the iconic Silver Centurion, which in Iron Man 2 made a kind of an introduction. They kind of mashed up the suitcase armor from the 90s TV show, which I always loved. That I always dug that moment when like every time he's getting ready to suit up, he just steps on a thing and just kind of folds into around his body, and he got himself a portable suit. And it's not like that in the comics, but like the Silver Centurion, which when I was like a little kid, I haven't really appreciated because maybe because the TV show made the gold and red uh, color scheme more well known. Uh, I didn't appreciate uh, the Silver Centurion because it wasn't. It didn't have like a unique gimmick like most other armors, like the stealth suit. It's like pretty black and sleek, but it color bends the environment around him, making him undetectable. But uh, uh, the drawback is like because it's so heavy with like the tech that relies on camouflage and avoiding radar detection and stuff like that, like absolute zero detection when he's trying to infiltrate a particular spot. The weapons isn't doesn't pack the same impact, pack the same punch as the other armors. But you also got the Hydro armor, which if he needs, to do something that requires, submersive uh, adventures, he got that, which I always dug. The space armor, if he needs to get out, like in the upper atmosphere and like contend something, he can. So like I loved each armor had its own little gimmick. I thought it was pretty good. But Silver Centurion, at the time when I was a kid, I thought it was kind of like lackluster because like it doesn't have a gimmick. What you might as well just wear his like red and gold stuff. But people love the Silver Centurion, and I grew to love Silver Centurion over time. Uh, I thought it'd been like a reading this. I thought, okay, it'd be a cool idea to have like the stealth suit go up against using the stealth suit going up against someone like Ghost, who technically has like a stealth suit kind of thing. And I thought like that'd be like always a dope idea to have like stealth on stealth. So you got unlike uh Demon and Ball where they kind of like uh Rhodey. I wouldn't say Rhodey took a back seat or anything like that, but he wasn't much of a presence as he probably should have been. And once again, you don't have like Pepper Potts in this, but in this, maybe it's because the time it was written in, you got Rhodey saying calling Tony Chief all the time, and like I don't know how I feel about that. It's like rarely he's gonna call him Tony at all. It's like you're not his boss per se, dude. It's like yeah, like he works for the Air Force, so he's like like a liaison. But you call him chief like you work for him, but he's your best friend. You don't need to call him your fucking boss just because you're the liaison. And then there's also like a subplot with this PR woman named Marcy, who I later found out not in this story arc, but a story arc or two after Armor Wars, she later becomes like a villain. But uh, she and Rhodey had like a thing, but she was pretty much like using them just to uh, try to do like a corporate takeover of Stark Enterprises. So, but we're not gonna hash into like Rhodey and her relationship. It's not really a thing. But you talking about like made for his time in the uh, prologue, essentially. There's like a moment where you know Tony, after dealing with Ghost and stopping him from uh, sabotaging this new invention that will help pick things up so he can eventually get the business going, and so he can pay his employees because he's gonna be dangerously close to beyond funds and bank file for bankruptcy and all the other stuff. So eventually he stops ghosts. And there was this moment when, like, he's essentially celebrating, when to have like a party, just like in the movies, like he's in Malibu and has like a house near a cliff kind of situation, and like a party's going on, and like he's trying to, because his house is kind of far away from where uh the headquarters of the business is at. And as he's flying, he's taking a suit because he thought it'd be faster rather than taking the car, because LA traffic, I guess. And then along the way, he keeps getting stopped when like all these emergencies going off. One of which is this woman who is going into labor, and he's rushing her to the hospital. And he calls like a Miss Sanchez or something like that, and it's like the way she's drawn, straight up white woman. I think blonde to boot. And it's like, you know, like I said, it's like if it was made nowadays, they would at least give her some kind of brown skin. If they was like it's small, but it's something like it's kind of like it's because I'm looking at it through 2022 eyes and stuff like that. So I'm trying to keep that in mind. This is made in 19. This was written in 1968, so I can't really like fault the thing. But besides all that, Stark is dealing with this bad guy, soon to be former bad guy named Force, who's just like the goons Beetle, the second Blizzard, who is Donnie Gill, who I guess will be a mainstay Blizzard moving forward, into probably like current times. And Whiplash, or was it Black? I think it was kind of Blacklash on this one. But Force, after doing like a job for Justin Hammer, he's essentially gone AWOL after he's pretty much like gotten tired of like his humanity is kind of like the conscience is eating at him. He got tired of working for this corporate monster and doing these dirty jobs, because as he mentions to Tony, like he was a punk kid who wanted power, worked for Hammer, and he just he thought he can get what he needed. He thought he can get what he wanted, and he gave him the power that he needed. But as years went by, he's starting to understand, like, okay, I, I'm I'm done with this kind of thing. And of course, there's a baby outside. Let's say. Close the window for a brief moment until that passes. But Forrest gone AWOL, and but Hammer remotely kind of, which is kind of confusing. Like he's trying to shut down. They saying like put like the suit into like lockdown, but like how do they put it? Like a safety lock circuit on it. Uh, uh, yeah, he through force of will, he managed to overcome like the lock for some reason, and then starts flying off. You couldn't like stop the suit from, because he doesn't want him spilling any kind of beans to anybody. So any kind of communication is cut off. He can't do much. He goes to Stark headquarters, and start like randomly shooting his force beam things, uh, and just to get like Stark's attention. So Iron Man comes in and he realizes, okay, he's miming something. He's trying to get my attention, so I'm keeping a close eye on him. So he goes inside and types on the computer, like, I can't communicate. I need help. Can you get Stark? I'm trapped in a suit. Uh, and by the way, because this is like written by Dave Michelinie, and at this juncture, once again, it's not gonna be for a long while until like maybe into like mid 80s to the early 90s when eventually Rhodey becomes War Machine. But I think it was Dave Michelinie. I could be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure it was him that was adamant he didn't want like Rhodey become like a superhero or like a run of the mill sidekick to Iron Man. Uh, he's just like he works for Iron Man and that is it. But uh, I'm not sure what had happened. Maybe just like fans, or maybe somebody at that time, higher up decides like, no, make him War Machine, or not War Machine specifically, like give him like a suit of armor kind of thing. Because I guess it gotten kind of old having, like, Tony's friend, coming in just like being his like chauffeur. Because Happy Hogan isn't a thing yet, I don't think, because we haven't seen Happy Hogan here, or in the last uh, review of Demon in the Bottle. So it's like he's pretty much chauffeuring around with like cars and like helicopters and stuff like that. So I guess that kind of got old. So eventually, they got the suit off of uh, what is his name? It's like Cole or something like that. Uh, um, well, last name Wilson. I think Cole. Someone with a C. But he goes to start to like he agrees to like tell him what he knows in return to getting him out of that like like metal coffin essentially. And he's like, okay, I agree to help you, give you the best lawyers possible. If you like, if you want to like, give up like your associates and what have you. So, uh, but it's not understanding the severity at first of what's going on. Stark like, okay, we want to turn you to police. They'll keep you safe. But then Hammer sends out, because he has like a man on the inside, sends out uh, Blizzard, Black Lash, and Beetle to essentially assassinate uh, Mr. Wilson. Of course, thanks to the assistance of Rhodey, who come bursting in through this big armored vehicle, uh, by the police. He hands like he didn't. Tony in this moment couldn't suit up because he didn't have it with him, but uh, they managed to make the get Wilson out of there before like he gets assassinated, and the heat was like starting to like spark up, so the goons had to uh, hightail it out of there. But they managed to like uh, what's the word? Uh, Regroup and set up a trap in order to stop, uh, Black Lash and his goons. Of course, they treat like the new at the time. Donnie was pretty the new guy. He was like a kid. The way it's drawn, they all look like they could easily be in like their late 20s, early 30s. Uh, but he was the greenhorn of the bunch, so he got pinched while Beetle and Black Lash make their escape, and they gave in order because they can't watch over Wilson 24/7, so they faked his death. Uh, uh, they gave him a new identity and like a new job, so he can start fresh essentially. And upon this is where you get into the Armor Wars, start of Armor Wars at the moment. While looking through the circuitry of Wilson's suit, Tony realizes most of the circuitry was based off Stark Tech, which sends him over the edge. It's like, when he started becoming Iron Man, he realizes, the dangers of having his weapons out there being used to hurt people. This is like a very big trigger for him. Mind you, this is also not too long after the events of Demon in the Bottle. So he's a recovering alcoholic. So it's like all the stress is, keeping like avoidance of like alcohol or like, falling off the wagon. But this is obviously like a big trigger for him. Having this, like how many other of my weapons has been used under my nose this whole entire time. And I've fought in all these, bad guys wearing all these, tech suits. How many of them have been used to, like do serious damage to people? So he have his lawyers, look into this, like, hey, try to go through the legal route. If anybody's like, have any Stark, tech in any kind of like weapons department or whatever, complete cease and desist. None of that. I don't want none of that out there that hasn't been approved by me, or at least in general. So while he's going to have his lawyers handle that stuff, on the other side of things, keep in mind this is also still during a period where people believe that Iron Man is Tony Stark's bodyguard, and only Rhodey would know the truth. So he's figured out like at least like a list of people that is his computers like pinpoint the uh, uh, like a good idea who might have some Stark stuff in their suits. Uh, they pointed out a guy like Shockwave, the Beetle, possibly Doctor Doom, which is more likely a possibility. Even though Doctor Doom predates Iron Man, I'm pretty sure over time he probably incorporated some Stark Tech in his gear, but we never see him go up against Doctor Doom, which is weird. Why you have him in like a list if you're not going to go after him? Stiltman, Crimson Dynamo, and which is another iconic Iron Man villain. Professor Power, which we don't see in this. The Raiders, these group of trio of thieves. Titanium Man, another Iron Man classic villain, and the Controller, another Iron Man classic villain. Which you like, if you doing any other of these classic Iron Man Rose Gallery, they're gonna be putting them in like Shang-Chi or uh, uh, or Ant-Man, to have them just pretty much be their villains in the MCU, which is like, not sitting in my stomach, right? Because like, come on, man, like you kind of wasted, like, Robert Downey Jr. The time that you had with him, you could have, used a decent amount of that stuff to have him go up against at least the Controller, a proper Titanium Man, a proper Crimson Dynamo, and a proper Mandarin. At the very least, a proper Mandarin. But so like he, Stark has a list. So he begins, start hunting these guys down. He invent these like circuitry box to put on these suits, and if there's any Stark tech at all, it short circuits everything. It's like you can't even salvage any residue or what's left of the armor piece. They're all going to be fried. Uh, so uh, Stark has this guy, the scientist named Abe Zimmerman, uh, to help with like the computer stuff, to like go through Hammer's like database, pretty much essentially create this kind of like tapeworm thing that they call, in order to like, even though he handles like like destroying any suits or physical stuff, there's still the software that, they can easily replicate more. So this tapeworm uh worms its way into anybody's software, and like, any aside from Stark's personal, or at least his own corporation's computers, to have his information and blueprints of the Iron Man tech, that's safe. Anybody else, that worm eats it all up and destroys any file and trace of it. So he also brings in Scott Lang, which, always knew growing up Hank Pym was like the Ant-Man. It wasn't until, I think, like, I'm pretty sure I heard of Scott Lang here and there before the first movie, but uh, the first movie kind of solidifies that Scott Lang is like the, standard Ant-Man. So he hires Scott Lang, who kind of looks like Banshee from the X-Men, like the Scott, you know, or is he Irish? Pretty sure he's Irish. I can't remember. Is it Scottish or Irish? I like to say it's Scottish. Correct me in the comments below if he's like Scottish or Irish, but I'm leaning towards Scottish. Uh, uh, so he, gets him to infiltrate, because you can't just send the tapeworm. They gotta be let in, because even though Justin Hammer is not as good as Stark, his stuff is still decent enough to prevent, like, any kind of virus or anything like that. To, unless it's like super sophisticated, uh, it is like, it takes some work in order to get one in. So, Scott physically goes inside, the circuitry of like the headquarters of Hammer, and releases mechanism to uh, which is only going to last like a minute, just a brief window, long enough for Abe to send that tapeworm in and starts, wreaking havoc with any Stark related content in Hammer's software. But then you see, like, Stark going after Stiltman, very easily, because Stiltman gets his ass beat by Spider-Man and Daredevil constantly, so it's really not really much of a match for uh, Iron Man. Then you have like the Mauler, another Iron Man villain, which I'm not really familiar of, but he just hands his gear to Iron Man without a fight. Like, here you go, sure. But in his head, he's thinking like, I always can, if I need to, I'll always get like I make another suit. It's not really a big deal. I just don't want to, I just didn't really want to have it out with Iron Man in my house and what have you. It's not worth it. So that was probably the two easiest of the people on the list that he managed to deal with. But it's kind of like a video game. It's going to be progressively harder, with the next, not harder, but, in increments harder-ish as he goes through the end of the list. Then he goes after the controller, who's been using this spa in order to manipulate the rich, high society people. This is LA, so you got all these people going through this, like these spas for these kind of treatments. So kind of influence them in order to facilitate, like, bigger finances, or at least you know influence on these people. He's known for mind control, without being like a psychic. And he uses controller discs in order to like manipulate these people. While battling him, one of his mind slaves get caught up because he mind control a bunch of people at the spa, and they all kind of surround Iron Man, and Iron Man is not able to fight back because they're innocent bystanders. But he placated to Controller's ego, and he just jumps in and tries to like fight Iron Man, and ends up killing this guy caught between them, because Controller is not just like a regular dude. He has like a kind of like a body modifications with, like, I guess Stark Tech, at least somewhat. And he ended up, killing this kid while being, pressing up against Iron Man's suit. And so the impact kind of, like, I think, snapped the kid's neck or something like that. But, he's dead, which is kind of like really sent, like, Tony in a rage and started like beating Controller nearly to death for that. But he put on the circuitry and nullified, the suit of Controller. Next, this things are getting because it's supposed to be an Armor Wars TV show, but with Don Cheadle as like the main guy, but don't know what's going on with that. I don't even think it's on the Phase 4, or I should say Phase 5 slate. At least I don't recall, because things have been like jumping around after the pandemic. So it's like a couple of months ago when they announced like the new slate of the MCU moving forward, because everybody's bitching about how, like, we don't know what's going on. Like, you don't look like Kevin Feige know where he's doing, and what's the end goal, who's the big bad, or what's the plan here, and blah blah blah. He gave you the new lineup, for the next by the end of Phase 4 through into 6. So there, you happy now? You're pissing your pants for nothing. And just enjoy the fucking ride. So Tony takes out like the 3 armored thief goons who's trying to hijack a plane full of cash, and he hands them pretty easily. But he had to outthink one of them because he was holding like the pilot hostage. So he smashes, he pretends like he's giving up, flies out, and then he remotely contacts like the pilot on his headset and say, like, Iron Man, when I say duck, you duck. Duck! And he smashes right through the front windshield, which is fucking dangerous as hell because the wind and everything like that. but uh, he saves the pilot and the co-pilot and takes out the thieves. And so now, like, Mars is bitching about, like, oh, it's a PR nightmare. You need to get your guy under control. Blase, blase, blase. And it's like, I'm handling it. Because now, like, Iron Man's going after an ally. Because just like in a TV show, that's what, the 90s TV show really borrowed heavily from this arc. Because if I remember, the few things that I remember pretty vividly from the 90s TV show was the Armor Wars arc and the time when, like, Iron Man was, duking out with the Hulk on the show. Those two kind of really stuck out for me, out of anything. Well, that and like the Fu Manchu racist kind of sort of racist, interpretation of the Mandarin in the show with the Fu Manchu thing. Uh, like, you know, even in like the Iron Man Armor Adventures show, they have Jean, who is like the standard Mandarin. His father supposed to represent like the old look of the Mandarin from like the old comics and stuff with the Fu Manchu beard, but not their racist, color skin or anything like that. He's played, you know, played straight and proper. But he goes after, just like I was mentioning about the TV show. There's like this kind of sort of allied to like Iron Man, this guy named Stingray, who has like some stuff in like the comics where they kind of make it's supposed to be like armor suits, but they kind of like fabric because the way it's drawn. The TV show made a lot of the suits look like fabric, aside from maybe Iron Man and War Machine. So Stingray looks like he's wearing like this like a regular like fabric kind of costume like Spider Man, but it's actually like armor. So Stingray is kind of like these flat things, so he can traverse the seafloor. But he works for the government, and he goes after Stingray because unfortunately his name's on a list, and I guess it's some kind of glitch because it was assumed somehow that like, oh, he's might have some Stark Tech stuff because Stark was like, no, not anybody needs to have this kind of circuitry in their gear. I'm the only one supposed to have sole control of it because I do not want it to get out of hand. Because later on he's taking on Shield because they got the Mandroids. You see a bit of the Mandroids in Armored Adventures TV show, and it's like an uh, an extra set of soldiers for Fury to use for like heavy duty hitters. Stark's like, in his mind's eye, like, nah. Even with my allies, if you have my stuff, it's too dangerous, or I don't want to take the chance with somebody on the inside or the outside, getting hold of that tech and selling it to somebody nefarious, using it for nefarious purposes. Can't have that. Can't take the chance. So he goes at the Stingray. Stingray doesn't have any tech in him. He tried to use the circuitry box on him after he had a tussle with this guy because Stingray said like, no, I'm not handing over my suit. Are you out of your fucking mind? I work for the government. I don't work for you. I don't have to give you up shit. You take it over my superiors. And Stark was like, all right, gonna do this hard way then. Then he goes after an ally and tussles with him and puts the circuitry box on. Doesn't work, and he's just like, oh fuck, and he probably like Stingray, my bad, bro. I it's a long story, but it's like, trust me and believe me when I say like I was doing this because like I felt like I had to, because like I got a serious thing I gotta take care of, and like Sting was like, yeah, I'll make sure I put in my report. which he tells his superiors what's going on. So now Shield is getting involved, and it's like, okay, your guy is out of effing control. You attack a government official, and so Brody, who works for like the Air Force, and it's like not. I mean, it wasn't until like nearly at the end of the arc where he's starting like telling like hey, it's like I've been helping you along this way, but you don't think this is kind of like effed up that you even starting to go after your friends? You should have mentioned this way earlier in this thing, because I could complained or at least give my like issues with the season 1 of Armored Adventures, how like annoying and naggy James Rhodes is in that show. But it was like a fine line between that and just not speaking up like you see in this arc, because he's like, okay, let's do this. And it's like, you know, that's a friend, but even my closest friends would like step up and say like, hey dude, you're going too far, like it's not a good idea. He's starting to go after, it's one thing you're going after these bad guys, but now you're going after our allies too, just because they might have something of yours that you are just afraid, you know potentially, which is legitimate, is your stuff, and you have like this fear of something possible happening in the future, which warranted, but you don't mind telling Fury this or telling your friends this, even because they're on like the West Coast. You got the West Coast Avengers here now. You got like the West Coast Avengers has always been treated like a joke, just like Force Works, another like West Coast superhero group. It has like you know well, Hawkeye is on both kind of teams, but this is West Coast Avengers, and you got like Moon Knight, which I wasn't familiar with Moon Knight back then. We all know Moon Knight now, but it wasn't until like later on in the mid to late '90s when I, first heard of Moon Knight and understood that he has some kind of like what we called it split personality at that time, but it was DID. But the first time I saw like a few panels of this guy, I forgot who wrote this, but at that time he had like a split personality that took the shape of Spider-Man, Captain America, and Wolverine, and kind of like try to take on personalities of each of these kind of identities, quote unquote. But that was just one writer. It wasn't like a main thing, but for a while I thought it was like a main thing. That was like a thing, and they kind of retconned it to be like, Jake Lockley and Mark Spector and Stephen Grant, which is the standard. Has always been the standard. That's just one writer who did some kind of twist, which I don't know the backstory of that, but that's not like a thing. Uh, so now, uh, yeah. So now, Tony's, pretty much like, okay, you made this big press conference outwardly expressing that Iron Man, I have no idea why he's doing this. He's not divulging anything to me. He's not divulging anything to me, and like I tried to like deal with the situation with him personally, but apparently he's gone AWOL. So like he leaves me no choice but announce like he's fired, just because Stark Enterprise is taking a hit, PR wise, government wise. Everybody's like looking at Tony because like you hired this guy and he's going AWOL. Why are you not doing anything? And then everybody was calling for Iron Man to be arrested, especially after what happened with Stingray. So Tony decided to like, oh, I'll work with Shield. Like I'll work with you, Nick Fury. Uh, we'll track down Iron Man, and he gives him this fake ass name because he kind of planned this just in case people were suspecting he might be Iron Man. So he made up like a fake person, digitally. There's like a guy named because he took out Beetle. earlier in the issue. But uh, he made up this person named Randall Pierce, uh, which I feel like I heard that name before. Maybe I'm confusing him with like the bad guy who turned out to be Hydra in uh, Captain America: Winter Soldier, because his last name was Pierce too. Uh, and Fury buys his bullshit. He was suspecting at first until he started handing over so much stuff, and I was like, oh, he wouldn't do all this if it wasn't legitimate. So I'll buy it what he's selling. And this is before Nick Fury was like a black guy. This is like white Nick Fury who, well, current comics, we still have white Nick Fury, and he's like associating himself with like the Watcher and looking out, globally wise for any cosmic level of threats. But like Black Nick Fury is supposed to be some kind of like a son of his, Fury Jr. kind of situation. Yeah, let's be honest, it was like retcon because the movies made him popular in the Ultimate Marvel comics. Nick Fury there was black, so they wanted to make the Nick Fury in the main continuity a black guy, so they did this whole rigmarole. Now Nick Fury's is constant. He's always been like for the past like decade and some change. He's been like a black guy moving forward, but we haven't forgotten white Nick Fury. He just like doing his own thing. So he Stark and Fury come up with the idea. Okay, hey, Randall Pierce, my bodyguard, knows this spot out in New York. This place where I usually get away from everything. He knows about it, so that's where my signals say like he's holed up in. So what we need to do, since he's packing like heavy duty firepower, which I'll help you catch him, but I need my armor he has back because my property. I want it back. You can have Randall Pierce, but I need you, since he's packing so much heavy duty firepower. You need to send the Mandroids because the Mandroids have Stark tech inside them. So it's like, Fury's like, okay, we'll send Mandroids and like Shield personnel. It's like, no, on the Mandroids, do not send anybody else, because it's like I don't want to have anybody else getting hurt, while I'm doing this. But Fury's not hearing it, so it was obviously a trap. It's like these little what look like landmines turns out to be those like circuitry boxes that pop up and attach themselves to the Mandroids. It gets some of them, but not everybody. So Iron Man comes out, takes down the rest of the Mandroids and hits them with like the circuitry boxes. After the whole thing is over and done with, Fury goes up to Starlight. It's kind of weird that Iron Man was so prepared. Are you sure you didn't tip him off? And then Stark, plays along like, how dare you? I'm trying to get my stuff back. This guy is, clearly, losing his mind. And he's, pretending to go through Fury's computer. Well, not Fury's computer, his computer. Yeah, it was Fury's computers, yeah. And it's like, he's typing on a computer and like this little knob thing pops off. It's like, maybe you need somebody to, help you with some maintenance. Fury, like, oh, dude, what? This is a bug. No wonder he realized who was coming. He bugged your place, Fury. You don't have nobody watching out for this kind of stuff. Next time I won't, need any help. I'm going to the Boy Scouts. So he really laid it on thick, just like get them off his trail. Then he Stark gets a visit from Steve Rogers. At this point in time, he's not like Captain America. He's just called the Captain at this point because like some issue in Captain America where like I guess he had like a falling out with like the government and what have you. So he just called like the captain at this point, and he's going to Stark like, hey, I need a new shield. Can you? Because he pretty much gave. This is around the time when like the U.S. agent was being invented, so he gave his shield back to the government because kind of like in Civil War, like my father made that, you don't deserve it, so he leaves it. So it's like, fine, I don't need it. Uh, uh, so in the sense of what the government pretty much like laid out to Steve was like, you know, when you was created, it was government who set all this up. We keeping the shield. I was like, fine. So he goes to Tony, and Tony invents him like a new shield made out of I think it was like adamantium. Because the first one was made out of vibranium because of like Wakanda. So uh, uh, I guess at some point after all that, because Tony like was going to like what was the raft or one of the prisons, uh, the vault. Him and Rhodey was plotting to infiltrate like the vault, pretending to be like, oh, we'll just go in, pretend like we're doing some kind of surprise maintenance, free of charge kind of situation, so he can be able to, because the guards there, who's looking over these super villains, a lot of them have these suits that was derived from Stark Tech. It's like, okay, we gotta take these things out with minimum amount of altercation, but they waiting at this diner, several miles away from the vault, and trying to hash out this plan. And then Stark notices Steve on the other end of the restaurant at a table, and he goes over, and I guess after talking with like the West Coast Avengers, he figures out that what's going on, because the Avengers know who, unlike Demon in the Bottle, like somewhere between that and this, the Avengers know who uh, Tony Stark is Iron Man. So uh, he's talking with like Stark is like, look, I know what's going on. Like, I'm going to ask you as a friend not to continue this escapade. And like realizing like, okay, I can't go with my original plan now because like this guy's here. So it's like he pretends to lead the matter, at that. But now he has to go with a plan B option, which obviously doesn't work because Steve's not stupid. He's not like a tech genius, but he knows his friend. And it's kind of like Batman and Superman kind of friendship. These guys are tight, and but they know each other well enough, just like Superman and Batman know each other well enough that, when they say one thing, they still double check. And it's like, yeah, like it's kind of like Tower of Babel situation, which kind of like a spoiler alert for Tower of Babel. With eventually, I will do a comic book review on, where it's like Batman come up with like these like contentiously plans to subdue uh, uh, Justice League members, but he kept that so close to the vest in a complete secret that once it got out, because Ra's al Ghul in the comics infiltrated the Batcave. He's trying to implement this plan. He doesn't want the Justice League interfering. Uh, the Justice League ended up finding out, and now like there's a whole thing. Superman, tried to get Barbara to call Bruce, trying to because he knows his friend well enough that he won't give him a direct answer, but he knows he will speak with Barbara and give her a straight answer. And it's like you know, like you knew blase 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 was going to happen, right? And Batman is not stupid because he knows Batgirl wouldn't say something like that, and only Superman will say something like that. So he cut the feed, and like Superman's like, "Son of a bitch," he knew. Uh, uh. So it's kind of like that. Like Steve knows his friend like won't let this go easily. So he hides away in the bushes and sees Stark sneaking in the back way towards the vault. After having Rhodey dressed up like the Electro and getting captured and sent to the vault because it was the nearest prison there, and uh, because the way they designed uh, the prison, trying to match up with Electro's abilities and how it like normal people can pass in and out of this these barrier because you can't have like a standard cell door because it'll melt right through. So it's like this prison was specifically designed for Electro, so he can't just go in and out. So since Rhodey takes off the costume because he's having white face on, and so he makes his comment like, if any of the brothers seem like this, they'll razz me from here to Christmas. And it's like, yeah, this is, you know, late 60s, early 70s. So it's like, a certain amount of dialogue is like, you know, take it with a grain of salt or not lose your shit over it. So with Rhodey's help, disabling, a lot of the security measures. So Stark can just go on in and starting like neutralizing a lot of these guards' suits. But he gets busted by Cap, and one of the guards was still because they use this knockout guys to lower their chances of having like a fight with all these prison guards. But some still was on duty, having to, the need to keep like the suits on. So there was like at least like a handful of guys they had to that Iron Man had to deal with. But one guy that was left, had like a duty to do, and like despite Steve saying like I respect you, soldier. Like I wouldn't do anything different from what you're doing, but I need you to get out of here because Steve knew he's probably gonna have to duke it out with Iron Man in this situation, but he doesn't want a chance for a casualty with this guy. So, um, uh, because like there's like because the only reason the guards are not passing out from the gas because they got the air supply in the suits, but because the damage sustained from fighting with Stark, the air supply is running low, so he has to take off the mask despite him passing out from the knockout gas because Steve has this rebreather thing on himself, so that's why he's not falling asleep. But the guard is like, I'm on duty. I got a job to do. I'm going to defend this place. And like, Steve's like, I respect you, man. I wouldn't do anything different, but I do not want you to get hurt, man. And like, in lieu of duking out with Stark, he made sure this guy was all right and has to take this mask off, otherwise he will suffocate to death. But Steve, brokenhearted, had to take advantage because he doesn't want to get stuck by Captain America. So he uses glove to shock Steve. It doesn't fully knocks him out, but he's immobilized temporarily. But he's still awake because the super soldier serum doesn't really fully kind of like it's keeping him from fully being knocked out because knockout guys probably will be temporary for this guy. But they share a glance at each other while Stark is disabling the circuitry of these guards' suits, and this glance, it's like well drawn art here because like just from this look each other giving each other, it's like fuck, like I just messed up one of the best next to Rogue is probably one of the best friendships that I ever formed, and I just completely shattered it in this one instance. And this is many years before Civil War started up in the comics, but this was like that one of those few droplets of moments, knowing that these two will probably be not destined to fight, but it's like they, they're so polar opposite on their worldviews of how to handle certain things that it's probably would have been inevitable that someday these two are destined to tussle because of their like so it's kind of like not like left wing or right wing, but you get my point where their views, despite agreeing on a lot of stuff, their ways of handling certain things are so uh, disproportionate. It's uh, like the best of friends having to probably come to blows. We don't know they come to blows later in the future, but this was like a pivotal moment, and I felt it reading this comment like, damn, Tony just like you think Stingray was like a big deal. This broke Tony Stark's heart that he's taking advantage of like Scott Lang because like Scott Lang didn't want to because he doesn't want to run the risk of going back to jail because he's looking after his daughter. But Stark, despite saying like telling Rhodey like, hey, I got the best legal team, so if something goes down, I can keep him out of jail. But he still feels crummy that he has to like put Scott in this position in the first place. Uh, uh, then he's abusing like his connection with like Stingray and Nick Fury and Shield. Now like this was like the big deal. It's like this is my best friend that my colleague that I helped save the world multiple times with. That I just not forever, but at this moment I kind of shattered our friendship or broke it or bend it or the foundation is crumbling. You know. But now it's like the government uh, is making this their suit of their own called Firepower, and which is like a clunky, crappy wannabe action figure. Uh, but while that is being put together, Stark at this point is taking his mission internationally because he goes all the way to Russia using the stealth suit armor with like rocket thrusters. He's doing this solo because he doesn't want Rhodey getting involved because then he doesn't want any chance of him being an international criminal once people realize Iron Man's going international with his mission. He's going after the Crimson Dynamo and Titanium Man, who are both Russian citizens. Crimson Dynamo is like a Russian soldier. So now he goes all the way to Russia to neutralize these two's armor that, Crimson Dynamo got taken down like fairly simple, mostly thanks to, Titanium Man's like hidden defenses in his hidden bunker because like he didn't want to work with like the Kremlin and Crimson Dynamo is like 6 weeks from retirement kind of situation. So he wanted to make sure that, he can exit it out this life with like all the benefits that so rare of Russian military men get. So, uh, because Titanium Man is going, the Russian government is want to take down Titanium Man because he's not following orders. Because because Titanium Man, like this mutant called the Gremlin, who's just like a short, smart guy, who's like uh, like a like dwarfism kind of situation, I think. Uh, and uh, Stark takes them both out. So now Iron Man is an international criminal. So now things are really getting heated. So they, uh, uh, so the government having firepower, who the suit is made by this. Uh, would have been so easy to have it just a Hammer, but this other. I'm not familiar with this because, like Justin Hammer, he's like a corporate, villain, but not somebody I, recognize or anybody would recognize. Uh, so just like with Tower of Babel, the Avengers kind of like disown uh, 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 Stark from being like a member of the Avengers, but it's like kind of like with Batman being ousted from the Justice League after Tower of Babel, and it's like part of me feels like, okay, you don't want him associated with the Avengers because they're getting hit PR wise, but it's like, yeah, obviously they won't like release to the authorities who Iron Man is, but because as far as everybody else knows, they don't know who Iron Man is either. So, I guess they can avoid turning Tony in, even though Tony finally at this point tells them why he's doing what he's doing, and they understand. But it's like you're still going too far, and you can't be in the Avengers anymore. But it's like, all right, but um, this guy named Cord, not like Ted Cord from DC. This Ted Cord in DC has Cord as Kord. This is Cord in Marvel, Cord, who one-off bad guy. Don't even think he ever showed up again after this, stuff in the 60s. Uh, uh, they have firepower, which once again, the way it was written in the time frame it was, as a black guy wearing this suit of armor, and you make a mention about like, wish we had this kind of stuff back in this firepower back in the projects, and it's like I can just hear him talk like that, and it's like, God, and it's like I'm not comfortable with that dialogue, but he mentions that. But obviously, Cord is planning on dealing with Iron Man under the guise of like, I want to help the government because this guy's a criminal, so we gotta stop him. But once he's out of the picture, he's seemingly free to like, you know, commit corporate espionage essentially, and got his own ridiculous, you know, toy action figure of a suit of armor going around and breaking a lot of like Stark stuff up because at this point, because Stark thing like, okay, last person's firepower dealing with them, but he has so much ordnance that is more than what the Silver Centurion can muster up to defeat. So Stark gets banged up. He flies to like the helicopter where Rhodey is like, waiting to pick him up. He's getting taken out of the suit. He's banged up. He got like, broken, a few broken bones and stuff like that. So, because it's like a kind of got like a little mini hospital going on inside this helicopter. So they, put these little blood packs, or IVs or whatever inside the Silver Centurion, remotely send that thing out and have firepower take it out. So for everybody in the world to know that, like, hey, Randall Pierce is officially dead. So Stark is content with the idea of like, okay, I don't have to be Iron Man no more. I can just work on my business, getting it all back. In current Iron Man comics, and Batman comics, matter of fact, in the past year, they kind of like, not made Stark and Bruce Wayne broke, but not as rich as they used to be. Maybe because like around that time, it's like like ever since last year, like like people are not looking too fondly on, as if they probably ever did, on like rich people thing, like they can just do whatever they want and they're not really helping with things, and they're too busy making penis rockets flying in the air to reach Mars and probably leaving everybody else behind who's not rich enough to repopulate on a different planet, kind of bullshit. So it kind of like eked into the comic book wise, and now it's like Stark and Wayne is not as rich as they used to be, so now they have to like go kind of low tech with fighting crime, which I don't care for. I don't think like they need to like because these supposed to be good rich people. They're actually using their money to actually help people, and I don't think it was a good idea to just reduce them because like trying to be for PC wise kind of thing. I personally don't think it was like a good call, but reading this old comic, it's like, okay, I guess it's not the first time when Stark nearly went broke. So there is a precedent, I guess. Obviously Wayne and Stark will eventually get rich again, but it's going to be like a decent while before that gets back in place. So like I said, like Firepower is now like starting to sabotage a lot of Stark Enterprises stuff. So Stark starting to just to keep his mind busy because he doesn't want to drink, and he thinks like, okay, I gotta stop this guy. Noise can handle Firepower because he's like and Cord and what they're doing. So he builds the '90s iconic golden red armor, calling himself New Iron Man, and starts taking down Firepower. And the tussle ends up because he got this big missile thing on the back of his suit, and Stark kind of crumpled the casing, so now it can't release. So once by the time like Firepower realizes it, he already sets it off, but it can't go anywhere. So it's in danger of eventually blowing up with him inside. And there is bystanders nearby, so you got like you make this kind of stupid decision of endangering the civilians around it. But Stark is like, oh, well, Firepower is like, you gotta help me. You gotta get me out of the suit. Stark is like, well, because of the circuitry will take a while, and you don't got that kind of time. And it's like, please, you gotta do something. And it's like he like pretends like he's got a finagle, but he was being like a dick, kind of. But it's like he, can with some hacking, he stole the timer and got the guy out and disabled the bomb and everything. And Firepower was like, "You could have got me out here this whole time." I'm like, "Yep," just to futz with him. So Tony at this point is like, realizes, okay, hey, uh, Iron Man is still needed. So he essentially like, will eventually start telling people like, hey, this is uh, a new bodyguard kind of situation. Because like, like the world needs, Iron Man. But with the armor wars over, you know, I can like I can start fresh. Just like with my business, Iron Man can start fresh too. Uh, and for the first time in a long while, Stark can finally get some rest because I guess he hasn't been sleeping all that well or often, which probably would have affected his decision making because he did kind of take it to far in some cases with like this mission, resulting in shattered alliances for a while. But then there's an epilogue, which goes into like Tony Stark's. He's dreaming, and he has to like uh, reconcile the stuff that he's been doing during this whole entire arc. Like the people is hurt, and through his time as Iron Man, and uh, which is kind of like quick in a way, because like if you've done some stuff that you obviously regret, or especially like traumatic stuff and things like of that nature, you don't just be okay. Especially someone like Tony Stark, who's known for insecurities and substance abuse kind of thing. Uh, uh, is always like a constant struggle. I love reading this part. Is that was pretty good when him just like come to grips with what he's done, and he's fighting essentially himself, this robotic iron monster thing with his face, and it's like you just essentially have to come to grips with like, okay, uh, you can move forward, but you don't have to forget, but you can move forward and like and just reconcile the stuff that you did and try to like build everything back up. But yeah, and that is essentially Armor Wars. And yeah, like I said, it's pretty good. Dialogue. Like I love the artwork, especially. Uh, is issues like Iron Man 1968. No, 1968. 1968. I'm thinking like I said it wrong. 1968 Iron Man issues 221 all the way up to 231. You want a clear overall picture of the Armor Wars. But yeah, I always love this like design of the Iron Man logo with like rivets and everything like that. Because the '90s did that, and that's always associated with like the Iron Man title. It's like metal, heavy metal. Uh, but yeah, I dug this. Great story. Like I said, like the few issues with like certain word choices, but like I said, it's written in the time that it was written in, so that was okay at that time. Uh, but yeah, it's like, but you know, well, I'm about to say like I don't know what the Avengers was necessarily needed, but I guess it was needed in the purposes of like showing like, hey, this had affected not just like Tony Stark in like the corporate way, but also in his superhero life. It's coming at him both directions, and kind of like messing with him so far to the point where it's like he has a clear goal, but he's not letting anybody in. He's not getting anybody's help, that kind of thing. So, classic Tony Stark. But, I think could have just gone with having like Hawkeye and uh, Steve being like the ones to deal with this stuff. But I guess it's nice to be, show the West Coast Avengers. It's got Mockingbird, uh, Wonder Man, who will eventually, I think, get like a TV show in the MCU, because we got White Vision. Well, Vision in general in the comics had like the brain patterns of Wonder Man, who died in combat with like a supervillain or something like that, and because Wonder Man and Scarlet Witch had like a thing, and that's why Scarlet Witch in the comics had like a thing with Vision for such a long time, because it was the brain patterns uh, of Wonder Man that she was connecting with. Because all that got retconned, so Vision and Wonder Man are two separate people. So currently in the comics, we have Wonder Man and we have a Vision, two separate entities. Don't know how they done that, whatever, but don't worry about it. Uh, I really hope they actually continuing with Armor Wars with Rhodey, because kind of interested in how that's going to play out in a TV show format. But yeah, like I said, give this a read. It's pretty damn good. You know, great, one of the greatest Iron Man stories. Definitely like a decent length compared to Demon in a Bottle, which is only like what, 4 or 5 issues. But anyway, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. If you like this video, share it, click the notification button, the help with the algorithm, and it helps me, not only helps you for more content down the line. And yeah, we'll see you guys in a little bit as I break down Season 2 of Iron Man Armored Adventures. And then after that, I'll cover Iron Man 2 movie. So, take care, and I'll see you guys in a little bit.